So thank you guys for joining us today at the FinOps podcast for Bytes. I'm Matt. I'll be obviously leading the conversation today, but we all know each other very well. So I'm recently head of cloud sales, responsible for ensuring that our clients are not only spending the right amount of money, which is the purpose of today, but also ensuring they're using the best technologies, helping them with their migration roadmap, modernization, all the things that partners like Bytes do really, really well. I suppose hand over to you for a quick intro.
Thanks, Matt. Name's Alamin. I look after our FinOps offering here at Bytes. Obviously, we know each other really well, but done a lot of work together on bringing out our new offering and the next generation of FinOps.
Cool. Chris College, run a technical team, solutions architects mainly. They cover applications and infrastructure, data and AI, but one of the things that is involved in every conversation at the moment is FinOps and how to technically achieve it. So very involved in looking at some of the innovative ways that we can work with our customers on the technical side of things to actually deliver modernization, cost savings and such.
It's important to note as well that you guys are completely agnostic. So your idea is to provide the best service for the end client rather than we're an Azure house, we want Azure, AWS, vice versa. So I think that's really important. Maybe we just dive straight into it then. Why is it important to get FinOps alignment correct?
What?
From the top to the bottom, where are we at, Alamin?
Of course. So if you look at mid to large size enterprises, and if you were, again, picking a very simple example here, but if you were to split the different people in the business into different categories, you would start off with the top left, who would be sort of execs category. We call them executives. So this would be CTO, CIO, CEO. They're the ones who are in charge of setting direction. They're setting a plan for the business. A plan could be, we're creating a new application for our business to innovate it, take it to the next level. They create a vision and then assign it to a team who we categorize as engineering. So engineering are product owners, app owners, people who are in charge of creating that innovation or creating that application. What they then do is they request resources, obviously, to do this work. That then goes to another team who we know as IT, and they say, look, I need these resources to deliver this new app that's going to innovate our business. IT look at it and they're like, okay, it's come from the execs, we're going to approve it. They start working, and end of the month, finally, it goes to the last category, who we call finance, or even procurement sometimes, where they get a big bill and they're like, whoa, we did a budget for this, guys. You need to stop right now. We can't afford this, can't do it. So it stops everything, and essentially you're stopping your business from innovating, because these guys can no longer work on these apps because the resources are too large or whatever. So it just halts the whole process. So the reason we need FinOps is because the FinOps team sit in the middle, well, initially at least. And what they're doing is they're communicating with everyone. So they go to the execs and they're like, okay, what's the plan here? What do you want to create? They go to the engineering team and they're like, okay, you want this application? Have you picked the right sizes? You're saying you want this size. Do you actually need it? Bit of questioning there. Go to IT and they're like, look, you've given them these sizes. Here's how you monitor it. Here's the cost so far. Here's, because sometimes we've seen cases where something can go wrong with some applications and cost a spiral out of control over a weekend, and then guys come back and the cost is really high. So, where they're communicating, giving them alerts and all that kind of stuff. And then finally, we're, still in the deal, going to finance and saying, look, guys, just that you're aware, here is what your bill is going to be. So helping them with forecasting so that they can budget accordingly. So that essentially enables innovation, because engineering can continue working on the app that's going to take the business to the next level. Okay? And that essentially is at heart what FinOps is.
That's really interesting, because when we've spoken about this before, what we've seen is all of these people kind of talking ad hoc, but they're not speaking the same language. And if you imagine a FinOps function as a translator that lives between these languages, I've been in, technical roles before, and as soon as I see a spreadsheet from a finance person, that's in a different language. That's something I don't understand. It's something I don't care about. Turns me off very quickly, talking about budgeting and forecasting and, financial reconciliation, all these words that they use. And so as a technical person, I'm sat there going, I don't want to do any of that. And, just having a FinOps function to be able to translate that for what that actually means into the resources that I'm deploying is really important. But one thing you mentioned to me a few weeks ago, which I found really interesting, was if you imagine the budget being a fixed budget, if you imagine that being a pie chart, and you've got, what stat was it that goes on IT resource spend? So engineers or something, it's about 50%. goes on engineering and resourcing and developers and things like that. And then it was something like a remaining 40% of it goes on the actual cost of delivering it, like the infrastructure costs and the software costs and the licensing and stuff like that. And that only leaves sort of 10% for innovation. It only leaves 10% of your budget that you've got to do special projects and, you know, get new things off the ground and fly new ideas and get better as a business. Now, if you want to free up more budget to that, you've got to eat into something. You've got to eat into your resource costs, or you've got to eat into your IT infrastructure costs. And obviously you don't want to get rid of people, especially whilst you're trying to innovate, which means that the only space that you've got, if you want to free up budget for innovation and special projects, is by reducing your cost of your infrastructure, which is really important to enable that innovation that you just spoke about, because you need money and you need people. And if you don't have those two things, and you don't have a FinOps function, you're never going to free up the budget for it, right?
Yeah, I think 100%. I speak to customers all the time, and they all say the same thing. We know that we can make these savings. We know that there's low-hanging fruit. We know all these things, okay? But the key is we don't have the resource requirements to be able to deliver this. And that's obviously where Partner Like Bytes comes in, and how we're taking, you know, our services, understanding those customer requirements that we have in day out, all three of us, and then improve our services to kind of facilitate and patch those gaps. You know, the point that you make there is, you know, 100% of that budget is taken up by these various things. You know, where's the budget for FinOps? Because you can't do that Gen AI project, or you can't recruit that extra resource for that development project because you're not keeping a handle on the cloud spend. So I suppose that leads into a key question. You know, why Bytes? How do we differentiate? You know, the people listening today want to know, you know, why Bytes? So I suppose, Alameen, talk a little bit about, you know, the experience that you've had with customers, either live customer examples or common problems that we can overcome. And obviously Chris can definitely overlay, and I'm sure I've got some ideas too.
Absolutely. So a big problem with customers that we see with customers is they would start the FinOps journey, save some money, and then stop there. And they say, okay, I've saved some money now, I've done FinOps. What we often find is they don't take enough actions. So they take a few actions and say, okay, I've done the job now, FinOps chapter closed, moving on. But what we find is that in almost every case, we find more in there than what the customer's done themselves. And then what we try and enable customers to do is we sort of try and make it very easy for them to make decisions on optimizing and things like that. And what we give them is through a different set of KPIs, we can easily, clearly show them when you are optimized or when there's still more to buy. Because look, the problem here is when it comes to optimization recommendations, you look at all the cloud providers, they all give you recommendations, all of them, okay? But the problem there is there's a lot of risk, because if you overcommit on those recommendations, you're still committed to paying Microsoft or Amazon or whoever that amount that you commit to. So most customers are like, I don't want to commit to all of that. I'm going to commit to a very small amount that I'm very comfortable with and save money, and that's it. So we're like, we have to give them clarity on how much to commit to, okay? So we have had some instances where customers have done the right thing and they have optimized, but they also stop there. So we take it a level further. So if you look at the journey of FinOps, the first step is visibility. I want to be able to see where every penny is going. I want to know down to a resource level where all the money is going. That in itself is a big problem. And the bigger the business, the bigger the problem. It's really hard. A lot of times it's also politics. You know, this is my subscription, that's yours. You know, we can't see each other. So it's really hard to even get the visibility piece. So the first step is visibility. Can you see your spend? The next step is optimization. Once you see your spend, you can save money because you know what's being used and what isn't. Most customers stop here because they save money. They're like, I've done FinOps. But that's only step 2 of a 6-step process that we take customers on. The next step is process. So I've now optimized. How can I make sure that my optimization stays in place for the next 3 years? We find that time and time again that between 12 to 18 months, the same recommendations come back. And that's because people have changed. You know, there's someone new comes in and they're like still following bad practices, or things like commitments expire and then they just, no one's renewing them. So the next step is process. So we set a list of processes to make sure that optimization stays in place. And then we look at automation. So we have all these processes, we optimize everything. I don't want an expensive resource there going through a workflow, ticking boxes or whatever. Can we automate? Okay, so how much of that can I automate? After you've automated, the next step is compliance governance. How can I make sure that my automation is working? Because at the end of the day, I'm trusting this to take care of a lot of important things. So the governance piece is really important. So we set KPIs in place, things like that. And the final last piece, which is an emerging trend now, is all about ESG. We've had many conversations with CTOs where they were more interested in the carbon footprint saving than the cost savings. They have really aggressive targets where they're like, carbon footprint, I need to reduce that. Don't really care about the savings. So that's now an emerging piece that we're working on. And it's all about relative carbon savings, not just upsave 1,000 trees.
So in a study from the FinOps Foundation, they found that the number one challenge for anyone trying to achieve FinOps was getting engineers to take action. But in another study done by a company called Positive Cloud, which we'll link, they said, what is your main driver to save money in cloud? To developers and engineers. And they said, is it based on cost reduction or is it based on carbon reduction? And I think in about 62% of cases, I think I'll get the stat, it was around carbon reduction. That was the bigger driver towards saving money in the cloud than it was to save the company money, which is, I think really important.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? What the people that are actually delivering, innovating, and building on those cloud environments care more about the carbon, because let's be honest, they don't hold the purse strings. So ensuring that is captured as well, and ESG requirements, as you've referenced, are becoming more and more apparent. I spoke to a client this morning, a large insurance firm, asking us about our sustainability and green ops credentials on top of us helping them deliver on a FinOps message.
But that's why it's really important to just, if someone says just commitment discounts, i.e. rate optimization, if you just do rate optimization as a way of saving money, you're not actually reducing the usage of anything. You're not actually trimming anything down. You're not actually making anything more optimized. You're just buying it at a cheaper rate. So if that's pumping out X amount of grams per CO2 into the atmosphere, every year, just buying it cheaper is not going to change that. It's not going to have a meaningful impact on it. So if you could just reduce the size of it or reduce the usage of it, you're not only going to reduce your bill, but you're also going to reduce your carbon footprint, which is really important.
One thing I wanted to jump on with one of those, that 6-step process, one of the things that we've seen the most engagement on is obviously automation. Automate, something that since I've been in the industry, if we can automate it, whether it's FinOps or anything else, let's review it. What successes have you seen with clients? Either give live customer examples or some stats around that automation element. Maybe Al-Amin.
Absolutely, yeah. If you look at the 2024 report, FinOps Foundation, the number one emerging item is all about enabling automation. That's a really big priority because some customers are now getting to grips with their processes. They're taking care of the low-hanging fruit, but they're like, I don't want someone in there managing that. How much can I automate? So automation has been a key priority for us. So things like alerting, things like anomaly detection, things like rate optimization, resizing and right sizing, all of that at the moment we have completely automated. And it's really important because, again, you're freeing up resource to focus on more valuable things. Because when you look at FinOps, the main value of FinOps is turning cloud from being seen as a cost center to being seen as a business enabler. Okay, so it's turning. So I have a customer who I was working with recently, and they do job listings. And I always talk about this because it's a really good case that we're working with these guys. These guys knew nothing about FinOps. We did so much work, went through all the stages, tagged absolutely everything. And before, every month, we jump on a call, and there's the CEO's like, Al-Amin, what's my cloud cost this month? But with them, we've got to a state where we can create unit metrics for them. And for them, we can figure out the cloud cost per job listing, okay? And with them, we were able to link the cloud cost to revenue. So now the CEO or the directors who are speaking to me every month, they're not saying, what's my cloud cost this month? The question now is, how many jobs have I been able to support this month, okay? And it's a different conversation because once you link it to revenue, then the cloud cost makes sense. I'm getting my value back in revenue. It's not just keep getting it lower and lower and lower. When what's low? What point are we trying to reach? Are we trying to reach zero? That's obviously not possible. And that's FinOps engineers should be working on that number there. These metrics is what they should be focusing on, not buying RIs, right sizing, these things can be automated now.
But it helps set sometimes the commercial model as well, right? We've got lots of our customers, they're ISV customers, they build software, they sell software, and quite often there's a massive disconnect between how much they're selling the software for and what it costs them to deliver the software. The people that are coming up with the commercial models for selling the software have no idea how much that commercial model impacts the delivery of the software, right? It could be based on number of unique users, it could be based on number of customers they serve, it could be based on number of records in their CRM, or whatever the software does. And so FinOps really does enable them to figure out, is it, how do you bill a customer? If you're selling your software to a specific customer, how do you bill that customer? What are the metrics that are going to impact the cloud spend? Figure out what that is to come up with your commercial model downstream. And that's a really important thing to do. Otherwise, we've had it before. We've had SaaS partners who are using our services, they're using the cloud platforms that we resell, and they're saying, we're just not sustainable as a business at the moment because our cloud costs are too much. And that's because they've never matched the cloud costs to how much they're charging their customers because they've never had FinOps.
Yep. I've had 3 cases where ISVs, we got through the stages, started saving money, and then I started working on the unit metric piece, and I was like, give me some information. What do you think your costs are right now? Give me some stuff that I can work with. And all 3 of them said, different times obviously, they were like, we have no idea. They're ISV completely on the cloud, and they have no idea what their cost is. But we're helping them.
It's like a builder quoting for an extension without knowing the price of bricks. Yeah. It's, that's his materials or their materials that they need to go and do it.
It's really common.
So we obviously talk about automation. Something that you hear a lot is obviously visibility and RIs and savings plans. That is the low-hanging fruit in cloud FinOps. That is where you mentioned, I've put an RI on, I'm done now. I can go back to my day job effectively. Emerging tech, and I use that loosely because it's been here for a while, but things like Kubernetes and containers and the managed disk auto-scaling, that is where we've seen way more engagement because clients have always struggled traditionally to actually reduce those costs in an automated way or an efficient way that it makes sense for their developers to be able to continue to innovate, to continue to build. So where are we seeing that new wave of automated optimization, and how do we help our clients deliver that?
So put yourself in an engineer's shoes for a second, right? This engineer's built the Kubernetes cluster, right? They've delivered the app on it. And Alamin's my finance business partner. And Alamin goes, Chris, I reckon you can save some money on your Kubernetes environment. And I say, how do you reckon you could do that? And Alamin says, here's a big report that tells you all the savings and changes that you need to make. And I go, well, look, I've got a to-do list as long as my arm of things that I need to do first. And now you're telling me that I need to change all of these quite technical things in Kubernetes. What am I left to do? I'm left to either take away from delivering the product, or I need to say, Alamin, why don't I give you access and go and do it? You're a finance business partner. Do you know that much about logging into Kubernetes and setting up HPN, VPN, and things like that? Probably not. So if Alamin came to me and he said, here's a list of things that need to be changed in the Kubernetes environment for you to make savings, and here's a tool that's funded that's going to do it all for you, are you okay for me to plug this tool in? I'm going to bite your hand off for that. I really am going to jump at that because I can carry on with my to-do list. You're going to get off my back about saving money, and it's all going to be automated in a way that's not going to impact my production environments. That's why automation is massive, because no one has the time to do this really technical stuff.
And a partner like Bytes is here to report all that data back via yourself and your team, and maybe talk a little bit about Disk.
Absolutely.
Kind of tactical that Kubernetes side. Maybe talk about Disk on your side.
Yeah. Storage is an interesting one. When customers first move to the cloud, the biggest cost typically is compute. And that's what everyone has been addressing for the past sort of 10, 15 years or however long it's been. Compute used to be the number one cost. So if you've done absolutely no optimization, compute is going to be up there in the top sort of 3 costs. But with time, as you're focused on compute and taking care of that, right sizing, doing all sorts of creative stuff, storage is sort of slowly creeping up in the background because you're always using more storage. And when it comes to right sizing of storage and playing around with it, there isn't a lot of flexibility. So most customers sort of just keep as it is and keep using more. Now that with all of our existing customers, we've addressed compute completely. Storage is then the big number. Typically, it's around 30 to 50% of the total cloud cost. It's literally huge. And what we found, we ran some scans across around 100 to 200 customers now. And what we're trying to find is how much storage they're paying for versus how much they're using. because that metric itself is really hard to get. It's not easy to get. You have to go manually down to every disk and check that. So we run some reports, and across 100 to 200 customers, it's all sizes from the smallest, 100 users to 10, 20, 40,000 users. We found a discrepancy of 70%. So on average, you're all provisioning by 70%, which is a crazy number. So you're there chasing crumbs on your compute, trying to squeeze a few more RIs, but storage is a big problem there that's no one's addressing. So that's been a big focus for us this year. Big focus.
And
it's
how,
all about,
how do we do that?
Yeah. So what we do now is essentially we autoscale the storage piece. So when it comes to managed disks, we are autoscaling that now. So instead of you committing and saying, look, I need a 1 terabyte disk, what a typical IT person would do is they provision 2 terabytes. If they can need 1, I'll provision 2 to be safe, because downtime is really expensive. I don't want to have downtime ever. Okay? So I want 1 terabyte, I provision 2 terabytes, I'm using probably 100 gigs on day 1, 200 gigs. All the cloud providers will charge you for 2 terabytes, which is, we accept that because downtime is expensive. What we're now doing is, because through autoscaling, what we then do is, okay, you want 1 terabyte, let's provision 1 terabyte, fine. Put the tool in, the tool will then start right sizing. It will say, okay, you're using 100 gigs, let's shrink that 1 terabyte down to 150 and give you a little buffer in there to make sure that you're safe. Okay? And then as you use more, it will start expanding. Okay? And that essentially is the technology that we're using now, where no human intervention, tool does its thing. And in terms of savings, we found a minimum of 30%, and that's inclusive of everything. That's 30% saving on that storage bill. Okay? So it's been a top focus. It's been a top focus for us this year.
So what you're saying is, if you take, if you're a customer watching this, have a look at what your total storage bill is, see if 30% is going to make a meaningful difference, and if it is, it's probably worth a conversation.
Absolutely.
That
Absolutely.
70% stat is funny, isn't it? It's like a single person buying a 7-bedroom house because that's what they think they need, right? Yeah. Can you imagine it? It's just wasteful, isn't it?
It's problem. And the thing is, because customers don't know the size of the problem, when we present these reports back with the data, they're sort of shocked. They're like, I didn't even know we're a cost-saving heavy business right now.
Do you want me to present these back in front of your boss? Or?
Yeah. I think we always presume, or we used to anyway, that when a customer, has got a really high cloud bill, you presume that they've got a really good FinOps sort of team, resource, process, etc. And that's not to say that it's wrong that they don't, or they're doing anything bad. It's just, it's difficult to get right. It can be an expensive team to support. And there's more complexity than just the RI piece, right? Use the iceberg analogy, visibility and RIs is that tip, but then what's below the surface? And that's kind of what we do. So I suppose, we talked about some really interesting topics. What would be a next step for a Bytes customer or a non-Byte customer to come along and say, wow, this is of interest?
Yep.
What's the next step?
Just going to touch on something that you said, which is they might have a big FinOps team that work internally for them, but don't forget that big FinOps team that work internally for them only see what they are doing as an organization. And one of the most important reasons why you'd work with someone like Bytes is because we see what loads of different organizations are doing. And so we've got loads of fresh new ideas on how to save money. It's not just sending you a report every month. It's not the same old tried and tested tools. We're working with customers that are doing so many different things that are unique and innovative that we can then bring back out to market for some of our other customers. So that is one really important piece. Alamin, do you want to touch on the other piece there?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of first steps, what we do is we have a sort of health check which is called Cloud Insights. And what we do is run a scan across everything. And what we do is we find the opportunities in your environment, so low-hanging fruit, things that we can automate, and we present back and say, look, on your storage, we can automate that. Kubernetes, we can automate. RIs, we can automate. And we give you some numbers. And these numbers are how much we can save you initially. And it's essentially to fuel the work. Because depending on your maturity level, if you're early days in your FinOps journey, cost savings will be top priority. You want to save money because the bill is going up, which is why you sort of kicked off the whole FinOps piece. Or you're being proactive and you're like, I know the bill's going to go high at some point soon. I need to make sure everything is in check. So we run a quick health check, which tells us what low-hanging fruits are there, how much can we automate, and that usually is the best first step because then you can see what's happening in your environment in a very different way.
Yeah. And I think what's important is that, we're Bytes Cloud Services, right? We're not here to talk about one cloud or the other. If you've got a complex multi-cloud environment, that insights report, we pull that all in across the board and we provide the data points. We can split it into team blue, team green, team orange, whatever it is. But, our services are geared towards helping clients, whether they're multi-cloud, one cloud, whatever, in order to review and save money.
Yes, absolutely. So multi-cloud has been a massive rising piece for a lot of customers. And there's difficulty because not all tools work for different clouds. I've seen one case where there was a Azure specialist, GCP specialist, and they used those two clouds. And both these engineers, or leads or whatever you want to call them, manage their clouds differently. So we looked at their spend and we're trying to figure out, okay, what's the low-hanging fruit? How can we have the one language? Their tagging was completely different. The way they set the hierarchy was completely different. So there was no common denominator. It was really hard to put things together. And for them, they've been doing this for years. So the amount of work to get all that rectified took ages. So there's a lot of complexity with multi-cloud, which now we are able to address with these. But it's an important piece because if you are not having the same focus on every cloud, it's going to be a problem.
There's a study that said that quite a lot of enterprise IT organizations are exploring a multi-cloud strategy. And actually, I take a bit of gumption with that because I don't think anyone ever strategized it. We call it the multi-cloud default, whereby people have just done things sporadically across different business units in different environments. They have a bit of SharePoint and O365 for some things, maybe a few Azure virtual machines. They have a bit of AWS for a SaaS application that could only be deployed into AWS. Sorry, not SaaS, like any software that can only be deployed there. They have a backup that's reporting into a private data, stuff like this. It just happens, right? You can try and strategize down one route, but your average, FTSE 250, FTSE 500 company will have this multi-cloud default by where there's different environments sporadically all across the place. The biggest challenge that I see that we're resolving is reining that in. We're tying a big old lasso around all of them, tightening it up and saying, let's operate this in a congruent way that makes sense, that saves money, saves time, and reports on it accurately. Because getting the reports on that is so difficult at the start.
Very hard. Very hard. And again, the buy-in. So that's another piece as well. Exec buy-in isn't always there. So, they're like, go save us some money, and then we want to take some actions. We don't have the exec buy-in, so we aren't getting much approvals and things like that. So it kind of holds things down. But once we flesh out the data and the information and relate it to things like revenue or whatever, suddenly the CEO's like, I'm interested now. I want to hear.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Thanks, guys, for your time. Hopefully for the listeners, it's insightful. Like anything, we want to make sure there's a key takeaway. From your perspectives, working with Bytes, the key kind of differentiators with working with us, where does that sit? How do we engage? And so that, we can ensure there's a key next step and we can start saving our customers more and more money.
Absolutely. From my perspective, really, it's providing our customers that visibility. So the next action is, if you're up for having a conversation, let's see where your spend is, what are you spending money on, and what low-hanging fruit we can target from day one. So the first step is reach out, let's do our scans, and then present back to you the numbers and what they say.
For me, don't accept a one-size-fits-all FinOps service. There's 3 ways of saving money in the cloud: rate optimization, usage optimization, and architectural optimization. But then there's 3 ways that you can achieve that. You either insource it, getting your own people to do it, you outsource it, get a third party to do it, or you automate. Now, for all the 3 different mechanisms of doing it and all the 3 different ways of achieving it, it's going to be different for each product and service in there. Work with a partner that can tailor a service depending on how involved or automated you want it to be in all of those areas.
Yeah. I would add to that, but I think that was a kind of a perfect summary to end with. So thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Pleasure.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.